The wrench slipped from Calypso Reeves' oil-stained fingers as the maintenance bay fell silent. Every mechanic, every crew chief, every passing officer had stopped what they were doing. The only sound was the distant hum of generators and the soft whistle of desert wind through the hangar's open doors. She'd been crouched beside the Apache's landing gear for the past 2 hours, replacing the worn tires with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Just another day at Forward Operating Base Viper. Just another routine maintenance job for the pilot everyone assumed was just another desk jockey with wings. But Commander Jackson wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the tablet in his hands, his weathered face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The personnel file he'd requested as a formality, because regulations demanded he review every pilot's record before approving them for combat rotation, had revealed something that made his blood run cold. 47 confirmed kills, 3 Purple Hearts, the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, a silver star he'd never seen her wear. The woman changing tires 20 feet away wasn't just qualified for combat operations. She was a legend. Jesus Christ, Jackson whispered loud enough for the entire bay to hear. Actual Jesus Christ. Calypso looked up from her work, wisps of auburn hair escaping from beneath her baseball cap. Her hands, steady as a surgeon's despite the tremor that had developed after Kandahar, gripped the lug wrench tighter. She'd been hopping to avoid this moment for as long as possible. The stares, the whispers, the inevitable questions about why someone with her record was stuck in a maintenance rotation at a forward operating base that most pilots considered a punishment detail. "Something wrong, sir." Her voice carried the measured calm of someone accustomed to talking people down from ledges, both literally and figuratively. Jackson's eyes moved between the tablet and the woman before him. According to her file, Captain Calypso Ghost Reeves had more confirmed helicopter kills than any pilot currently serving. She'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and a classified operation in Syria that had earned her a reputation among special operations forces as the pilot you called when everything else had failed. The same woman who'd spent the morning arguing with Supply about requisitioning new brake pads was responsible for single-handedly extracting a pinned-down Delta Force team from a hot landing zone while taking fire from 3 directions. The disconnect was staggering. The maintenance bay remained frozen in tableau, everyone waiting for Jackson's next words. CW4 Martinez broke the silence first. "Ghost," his voice cracked slightly on the call sign. "You're Ghost." Calypso set down the wrench and slowly rose to her feet, wiping her hands on a shop rag that had seen better decades. The movement was fluid despite the steel rod in her left leg, a souvenir from a Taliban RPG that had come too close during a night extraction outside Musa Qala. She'd been flying with 2 wounded crew chiefs and a cabin full of Marines when the round detonated just off her starboard side, sending shrapnel through the cockpit and nearly taking her leg off below the knee. She'd still managed to get everyone home. "Depends who's asking," she replied, though they both knew the answer. There was only one Ghost in Army aviation, and she was standing in this maintenance bay, covered in hydraulic fluid and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Jackson looked at the tablet again, scrolling through mission reports that read like something from a Hollywood script. Operation Phantom Thunder, the Najaf extraction, the Battle of Fob Chapman, where she'd made 11 consecutive gun runs against superior numbers to buy time for a medical evacuation that saved 37 lives. Each mission detailed with the clinical precision of military documentation, but Jackson could read between the lines. He could see the cost. The commander studied her face, nodding the way her eyes never quite met his, always scanning, always calculating. He recognized the hypervigilance, the constant assessment of threats and exits. He'd seen it in every veteran who'd spent too much time in places where a moment's inattention meant death. But there was something else there too, something that made him understand why she'd requested maintenance duty instead of a flight assignment. "Why aren't you flying?" Jackson asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Calypso's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment the mask slipped. Jackson caught a glimpse of something raw and wounded, quickly suppressed but unmistakably there. "Medical cleared me for limited duty only," she said finally. "Maintenance keeps me useful." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Her medical records showed full flight status, cleared for all operations including combat. She could be flying Apache tomorrow if she wanted. The question was why she didn't want to, and Jackson suspected the answer was buried somewhere in those 47 kills and the missions that had earned them. The maintenance bay slowly returned to life as mechanics resumed their work, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Whispered conversations rippled through the hangar as word spread. Ghost was here. The legend was real, and she'd been hiding in plain sight, changing tires and calibrating instruments while everyone assumed she was just another pilot riding out her service commitment in the relative safety of a re-echelon assignment. Staff Sergeant Chen appeared at Jackson's shoulder holding a radio handset. "Sir, we've got a situation developing 30 clicks north. Convoy under fire, requesting immediate air support. Birds are 20 minutes out, but—" He glanced meaningfully at Calypso. "We've got an Apache fueled and armed right here." Jackson looked at the helicopter Calypso had been working on. She'd been thorough, as always. New tires, fresh fluids, weapons systems checked and double-checked. It was ready to fly, but the woman who could make it sing was standing there with grease under her fingernails, looking like she'd rather face a court-martial than climb into that cockpit. "Ghost," Jackson said softly, "those are American soldiers out there." Calypso closed her eyes for a moment, and Jackson could almost see the war playing out behind her eyelids. The weight of all those missions, all those impossible choices, all those lives hanging in the balance of her split-second decisions. When she opened them again, something had changed. The mechanic was gone, and the pilot was surfacing. "I'll need a co-pilot," she said quietly. "Martinez volunteers," Jackson replied immediately, ignoring the CW-4's surprised expression. "Sir, I haven't flown with Ghost before." "You haven't flown with anyone like Ghost," Jackson corrected. "Consider it a privilege." Calypso was already moving toward the Apache, her gait shifting from the careful shuffle of someone favoring an old injury to the purposeful stride of a combat pilot heading to war. Her hands found familiar switches and controls as she began the pre-flight check, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought might hesitate. The transformation was remarkable to watch. This was what she'd been built for, what she'd trained for, what she'd survived for. The radio crackled with updates from the convoy. 3 vehicles, 2 disabled, 12 wounded, enemy forces closing from multiple directions. Time was running out, and help was still 15 minutes away. Unless Ghost decided to fly. The Apache's turbines began their characteristic whine as Calypso brought the engines online. Martinez scrambled into the front seat, still processing the fact that he was about to fly with a living legend who'd been anonymously maintaining his aircraft for the past 6 months. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman everyone had dismissed as a has-been was about to remind them why legends become legends in the first place. Jackson watched from the hangar entrance as the Apache lifted off, its rotor wash scattering dust and debris across the maintenance bay. For a moment, the helicopter hovered just above the ground, as if Calypso was making one final decision. Then it tilted forward and accelerated into the desert sky, becoming a dark speck against the endless blue. The commander keyed his radio. "All stations, Ghost is airborne. I repeat, Ghost is airborne." The response was immediate and electric. Every pilot, every crew chief, every ground controller who'd grown up hearing stories about the legendary Apache pilot, who'd never lost a soldier, suddenly realized those stories were about to get a new chapter. The woman they'd been ignoring was flying toward a fight that would either restore her legend or destroy what remained of it. As the Apache disappeared into the heat shimmer of the desert horizon, Jackson found himself holding his breath. Somewhere out there, American soldiers were counting the minutes until help arrived. They had no idea that help was coming in the form of a mechanic with grease under her fingernails and ghosts in her eyes. But Ghost knew. She'd always known. The only question was whether she still had it in her to be the pilot those soldiers needed her to be, or if too many missions, too many impossible choices, and too much weight of command had finally broken something that couldn't be fixed with a wrench and determination. The radio crackled to life. "Viper Base, this is Ghost 17 approaching the zone. What's the situation?" Her voice was steady, professional, betraying nothing of the internal battle Jackson suspected she was fighting. This was the voice that had guided dozens of units through impossible situations, the voice that had never promised anything she couldn't deliver. "Ghost 17, we have a 3-vehicle convoy taking effective fire from a reinforced squad, possibly platoon strength. 2 vehicles disabled, multiple wounded, enemy approaching from north and east. Friendly forces are in a defensive position approximately 200 meters south of the road junction." "Copy that, Viper Base. Beginning my approach now." The radio fell silent except for the distant sound of rotors and the whispered prayers of everyone listening. Jackson found himself remembering every story he'd heard about Ghost, every impossible mission she'd accomplished, every time she'd brought everyone home when no one else could. The desert held its breath, waiting to see if the legend still had life in her. In the Apache's cockpit, Calypso could see the smoke rising from the convoy's position. 2 Humvees, one overturned, another with its engine compartment blown apart. Bodies moving in the sparse cover of rocks and scrub brush, some in American digital camouflage, others in the earth-toned clothing of insurgents. Muzzle flashes sparked like deadly fireflies in the afternoon sun. She'd seen this scene 100 times before, in a dozen different countries, with 100 different units depending on her to turn the tide. The weight of those previous missions pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Each successful extraction, each life saved, each impossible shot that had to be made adding to the burden of expectation. "Ghost, I've got visual on the enemy positions," Martinez called from the front seat. "Multiple fighting positions, looks like they've got this planned out." Calypso could see it too. This wasn't a random ambush. The enemy had chosen their ground carefully, established overlapping fields of fire, positioned themselves to maximize damage while minimizing exposure. Professional work. The kind of tactical thinking that made every mission a chess match played with bullets and blood. "Viper Base, Ghost 17, I need a danger close authorization. Friendlies are within 50 meters of target area." The pause on the radio stretched like a held breath. Danger close meant risking American lives to save American lives, trusting a pilot to thread the needle between salvation and catastrophe. It was the kind of decision that ended careers if it went wrong, the kind of responsibility that had driven more than one pilot to request re-echelon assignments. "Ghost 17, you are authorized danger close. All friendly call signs, Ghost is inbound hot." Calypso felt the familiar calm descend, the same strange peace that had carried her through every impossible mission. Time seemed to slow as she lined up her approach, calculating angles and distances with the intuitive mathematics of someone who'd been doing this longer than she cared to remember. The Apache responded to her touch like a living thing, every control input translated into precise movement through 3-dimensional space. "Jesus," Martinez whispered as he watched her work, "I've never seen anyone fly like this." She didn't respond, couldn't respond. All of her attention was focused on the problem ahead, 12 American soldiers trapped in an increasingly desperate situation, depending on her to solve a tactical equation that had no margin for error. The kind of problem that had defined her career and haunted her dreams. The first gun run was textbook perfect. 30mm rounds stitched across the enemy positions with surgical precision, eliminating the northern threat while staying well clear of friendly forces. The Apache pulled out of its dive just above the desert floor, using terrain masking to break contact before the enemy could respond with effective fire. "Holy shit," came a voice over the radio. "Ghost, that was beautiful." But Calypso was already setting up for the second run, targeting the eastern positions that were still pouring fire into the American defensive perimeter. This one would be harder, require a steeper angle to avoid hitting the wounded soldiers who'd taken shelter behind the overturned Humvee. The margin for error was measured in feet rather than meters. The Apache rolled inverted at the top of its approach, giving Calypso the angle she needed while presenting the smallest possible target to enemy fire. For a moment that felt like eternity, the helicopter hung upside down in the desert sky, its pilot calculating the exact moment to roll upright and engage. Then the world flipped again, and death fell from above with mechanical precision. When the smoke cleared, the desert was quiet except for the sound of rotor blades and American voices calling for medics. Ghost 17, all enemy positions are silent. Outstanding work. Calypso brought the Apache into a hover over the convoy position, studying the scene below. Soldiers were emerging from cover, waving, giving thumbs up. No one was shooting at them anymore. Another successful mission, another group of American servicemen who would go home to their families because she'd been able to do what others couldn't. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like carrying another stone up an endless mountain. Viper Base, Ghost 17. Zone is secure, requesting immediate medical evacuation for wounded personnel. Copy Ghost. Medevac is inbound, ETA 15 minutes. Remain on station until they arrive. The Apache settled into a slow orbit over the convoy, providing overwatch while the soldiers below tended to their wounded and prepared for extraction. Martinez kept up a steady stream of chatter about the mission, about her flying, about how he'd never seen anything like it. Calypso let his words wash over her without really listening, her attention focused on the task at hand and the weight of what came next. She'd proven she could still fly, still fight, still bring everyone home. The legend was intact, maybe even enhanced. But legends were heavy things to carry, and she was tired of the weight. Every successful mission just raised the stakes for the next one. Every life saved another reason why she couldn't walk away, couldn't choose the quiet peace of maintenance bay anonymity over the terrible responsibility of being irreplaceable. The medevac helicopter appeared on the horizon, its red cross markings a welcome sight against the endless blue of the desert sky. Soon the wounded would be in capable hands, the convoy would be reinforced or extracted, and she could return to base. Return to the questions and stares and weight of expectation she'd been trying to avoid. Ghost 17, Viper Base. Outstanding work today. The whole base is talking about it. That was what she'd been afraid of. The talking, the expectation, the assumption that because she could still do the impossible, she should continue doing it. The legend demanding to be fed with more missions, more lives, more impossible choices between bad options and worse ones. As the Apache flew back toward base, Calypso found herself thinking about the mechanic's coveralls hanging in her locker, about the simple satisfaction of fixing things that stayed fixed, of problems that could be solved with the right tool and enough patience. She thought about sleeping through the night without dreams of rotor blades and muzzle flashes and radio calls that arrived 30 seconds too late. But she also thought about 12 American soldiers who were alive because she'd been able to do what no one else could do. 12 families who wouldn't get the visit from uniformed officers, 12 chairs that wouldn't be empty at holiday dinners. The arithmetic of salvation that had defined her career and would continue to define it as long as she wore the uniform. The base appeared ahead, its collection of concrete buildings and prefabricated structures shimmering in the desert heat. She could see people gathering at the flight line, could imagine the conversations already beginning about Ghost's return, about what it meant, about what came next. The quiet anonymity she'd cultivated over the past 6 months was gone, burned away in the space of a single mission. As the Apache touched down and its engines began to spool down, Calypso sat in the cockpit for a moment longer than necessary, gathering herself for what came next. Martinez was already climbing out of the front seat, his excitement barely contained, as he prepared to tell anyone who would listen about flying with the legend himself. Commander Jackson was waiting at the edge of the flight line, his expression unreadable. Behind him, maintenance crews and other pilots watched with barely concealed fascination. Word had already spread about the mission, about the perfect gun runs, about Ghost proving she was still Ghost. Calypso finally climbed down from the cockpit, her movements careful and deliberate. Her leg ached from the flight position, the old injury complaining about stress and altitude changes. But her hands were steady as she began the post-flight inspection, checking for damage or mechanical issues with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. "Hell of a thing," Jackson said quietly as he approached. 12 soldiers who get to go home because you remembered how to be yourself." She looked up from her inspection, meeting his eyes for the first time since the mission briefing. There was something different in her expression now, a resolution that hadn't been there before. "I never forgot," she said. "I just wasn't sure it was worth remembering." Jackson nodded, understanding more than she'd actually said. He'd seen it before in other combat veterans, the weight of competence, the burden of being too good at something too important to walk away from, the curse of being irreplaceable in a job that required pieces of your soul as payment for success. "So what now?" he asked. Calypso finished her inspection and stepped back from the Apache. The helicopter sat quietly on the tarmac, another successful mission added to its service record. Tomorrow, there would be more maintenance, more repairs, more preparation for the next impossible thing that needed doing. "Now I get back to work," she said. "These birds don't maintain themselves." But they both knew something had changed. The mechanic with grease under her fingernails was gone, replaced by the pilot who'd never lost a soldier. Ghost was back, whether she wanted to be or not. The legend had a life of its own now, fed by today's mission and hungry for the next one. As she walked back toward the maintenance hangar, Calypso could feel the weight of all those watching eyes, all those expectations, all those future missions that would depend on her being the pilot they needed her to be. The quiet peace she'd found in routine maintenance was gone, replaced by the terrible responsibility of being extraordinary at something that mattered. The desert wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of aviation fuel across the flight line. Somewhere in the distance, another helicopter was spinning up for a mission, another pilot preparing to risk everything for the chance to bring everyone home. The war continued, as wars always did, demanding its tribute of courage and skill and pieces of human souls. And Ghost would answer when it called, because that's what legends did. Even when they were tired of the wait, even when they'd rather change tires than change the world, they answered the call. Because somewhere out there, American soldiers needed someone who could do the impossible, and she was the one who could do it. The hangar doors stood open ahead of her, revealing the familiar landscape of tools and spare parts and aircraft waiting for attention. But it looked different now, less like a refuge and more like a preparation area for the missions that would surely come. The quiet anonymity was gone, burned away in the desert heat of a single perfect engagement. Ghost was back, and the legend was hungry for what came next.